Huge day for both Ripple and XRP. Doesn't get bigger than this. Look at this deal that Ripple signed here. They're going to be tokenizing Franklin Templeton money market funds. And this is the kicker. It's going to be tokenized on the XRP Ledger. Investors will be able to use RLUSD to trade for Franklin Templeton's money market funds. And again, we've seen what BlackRock's done with their BUIDL platform where you can invest in treasuries. And the idea is someday you'll be able to cash out to stable coins. And we know the problems that come with doing that on the Ethereum network when it gets quite congested. Well, this is a system for the future. We have Franklin Templeton. You can move money into their money market funds. And then if you need your cash, well, you can buy into and get out of those money market funds with RLUSD. That is the future. That is where this is going. And when I first saw this, I assumed it was going to be on the Ethereum blockchain, and I was pleasantly surprised to see, no, this is XRP all the way. I mean, this is a big name. If this happened in any, former years, it would be the deal of the year. It would be the news story of the century. There's so much going on now. It's almost an afterthought, but don't be fooled. You're going to see more deals like this, and it's going to be scalable. It's going to be usable, and this is going to be world-class. And being able to, move your money into these money market funds, but be able to cash out to very usable RLUSD instantly, that's going to be popular. That was a really, really big deal here. Now, we finally got it here. SEC approves the Grayscale Digital Large Cap Fund. This ETF, it's a basket product. Essentially, it's an ETF for Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, and Cardano. Any way you want to look at it, those assets are now going to be trading in ETFs. They pretty much gave them all approval at the same time. If you want to really look at this with clarity, we're going to move forward. Now, I like these types of products. I think they're going to be popular. I don't know about this Grayscale one, for example, because Grayscale charges ridiculous fees, and further, I don't like their weighting so much, but people are going to want these bundled products because a lot of investors are not going to want to wade through all this stuff like we do and get into the nitty gritty. They just want exposure to the broader crypto market. And so this kind of stuff is going to be good. And people will look at those reports and see quarter after quarter, XRP's outperforming. And they're going to say, you know what? Maybe I should get some of that direct. You best believe that's going to happen. This is a big moment forward. It tells you right now, XRP is fine to trade in ETFs, Solana, and Cardano. All three of those are just fine to trade on the open market. So individual ETFs are coming any moment. And we should see more things like this. And you're going to have, staking ETFs. You're going to have currency ETFs. AI, all sorts of stuff within blockchain, DeFi ETFs, you best believe it. This is a game changer, just the very first step. This was an odd one originally. If you remember, I reported the first XRP ETF has been approved, and it was like 6 hours it was approved, and then they came back and said, sorry, we got to rug everyone. We're not approving this thing right now. They took it back. Well, it's final. This thing's going to trade. XRP is trading on the open market as part of this bundled product, and the XRP only ETF is just right around the corner. That was a big deal, and it broke here today. And part of that was the SEC approved a generic listing standard for commodity-based trust shares on the NASDAQ, the New York Stock Exchange, things like this, a move that will streamline the approval process for crypto exchange-traded products. So again, they have the regulations, they have the clarity. If you want to bring appropriate crypto to market, now you have your pathway, and we're going to see more and more of this. SEC doing a great job. It's official. The Fed did, as expected, cut the interest rate by 25 basis points, blaming a weaker labor market. That's the deal. They have their dual mandate. Inflation is still high, but guess what? It's going to stay high. That's not going to go away. But there are cracks in the labor market, and when that sucker starts to go, it goes quick. You got to be careful. Fed finally making a move. In my opinion, they're a little bit late. Now, Jerome Powell today said, there's not widespread support at a 50 basis point cut. They probably should have. I'd rather they bring it down in a slow, methodical way. I think they just waited too long to start this process. And I bet you before it's over, they're going to be panic cutting, doing 50 basis point cuts. But they ain't going to do that right now. That would be to admit they were wrong and they should have acted quicker. No surprise here. Again, we expected a 25 basis point cut. And more importantly, it just tells you there's going to be looser financial conditions. which should be conducive to growth within risk assets. And in crypto, never forget though, it's not really all sunshine and rainbows. They are cutting that rate and loosening financial conditions because, well, there's problems out there and they have to do so. Gary Gensler came crawling out of his cave here or wherever. Look at him. Crypto Eddie saying, looking older, fragile, and shaky. That's what happens when you go against the XRP army. Hope this doesn't give anyone PTSD, but I want to play this interview from Gary because they're saying, look, the new administration, they have, unwound all your handiwork here. What do you think about that? Let's see what Gary has to say.
Big picture, now that you are out of the administration and you see what the SEC under Paul Atkins is doing, they are reversing a lot of what you did and seemingly have completely opposite priorities on issues like crypto, for instance. How do you think about sort of what that means for what you were able to do at the SEC, and how are you feeling about what they're doing now?
So I'm very proud of what we accomplished. I think that the reforms we got done in the stock markets, even something is kind of plain.
This guy's going to pivot to saying, hey, we took settlement to from T+2 to T+1, like stuff that has nothing to do with crypto. This guy's proud. His reign of terror is over, thank goodness. And you notice he's going to pivot and try to talk about other things, other accomplishments, which there were some, of course. He doesn't want to touch this, but he's going to have to. Let's hear what he has to say.
Vanilla is shortening the settlement cycle from 2 days to 1 day and helping our markets be that much more efficient. And Europe is now chasing us and trying to do that. But for regular investors, I think we put in place reforms that I think this administration is continuing in the U.S. Treasury markets to keep them more liquid. But look, elections have consequences, and I respect our democratic forms. And naturally, Chair Atkins is going to take a different approach than his predecessor, and his successor may take a different approach.
And the crypto community is ecstatic.
And that's a good point. And we're going to talk about this here in a future story. They got to get that infrastructure bill through, because what Gary just said, you don't know what creature's going to come crawling out of the woodworks down the road. You want this stuff codified. You want to make sure you have clear laws. You might not need it right now. The SEC, they might be willing to deal with the crypto space. You don't know who you're going to get in the future. You want to be protected by law. They got to get that thing done, because there may be another Gary Gensler somewhere down the road, and that's unacceptable. Hopefully they get that bill done. Again, we have a story coming up on that here shortly.
Not to have you there anymore, and to have him there right now, what you did around securities and enforcement actions. And looking back on it, I mean, do you think that was the right call?
Yes, I think.
Because look, now we have this burgeoning industry, and there's so much more innovation and leadership in the U.S.
And a lot more capital coming into it.
There may be more capital in terms of the interest in the public. The public is interested. I get that. But I took an oath of office. I also ran a law enforcement agency. And my predecessor, Jay Clayton, a very fine individual, ran the SEC. He's now the head of a law enforcement agency, again, up here in New York.
Yep.
Was bringing many cases in this field. Was bringing over his tenure about 80 to 100 cases. Over my tenure, we brought about 100 cases. We were consistently trying to ensure for investor protection. And in the midst of it, we had a lot of fraudsters. Look at Sam Bankman-Fried, and he wasn't alone. And so investor protection. So when I look at the field that trades mostly on momentum, mostly on, frankly, hype for investors.
You think this is dangerous, what they're doing?
I think that for investors, everyday investors, the 5 to 10% of Americans who invest in crypto, and it's hard to get the real, but that it's a highly speculative, very risky asset. And in most of these tokens, put aside Bitcoin, but most of the other tokens are not tied to any fundamentals. And there's 5 or 10,000 of these tokens. So usually over time, you find new equilibriums. Like Warren Buffett would say, what are the goods? What are the revenues? What are they selling? And so forth.
This is what's so irritating about this guy. these aren't businesses. You don't value them as such. You don't say you can only invest in businesses. You can't invest in commodities. We invest in gold and all these things. His point is ridiculous. And for him to say, well, put everything aside besides Bitcoin, that's not his call to make. He's not there to be your financial advisor. He was there to be the head of the SEC. And that's the problem here. He still is trying to push that same narrative. The good thing, though, is whatever narrative he wants to push doesn't really matter any longer. Anyway, glad we vanquished, Dracula there once and for all, and we can move on. Also, big news here. Now, I know a lot of people don't like it. Options are going to see we're going to have options in the future market. Eventually, once we get spot, there'll be options there as well. A lot of people are worried about manipulation, all this kind of stuff. We see options with Solana and XRP futures. This is the deal. This is a maturing asset class. You have to have options. You have to be able to short positions. You got to be able, to take out longs and things like this. You're always going to have this, and this shows we're trucking along. First, you get options in the futures market, and then eventually in the spot market. And this is about, any mature trading, asset class, you're going to have this kind of stuff. So it's just all falling in order. We keep making progress, and that's so important. Now, talking about that need for regulations, that we need to have this stuff codified, we see Charles Hoskinson praising Ripple and the XRP army here. He had a meeting with A16, Ripple, Coinbase, and legislators here trying to get that infrastructure bill passed. Hopefully it happens sooner than later. I think it will. I think it gets passed this year. But they got to push. You saw what happened right before it was, a done deal on those stable coins. People start throwing a fit. Why? Because they want to squeeze a little bit out of the situation here. And you got to push through that. You got to get it done. The who's who are in Washington, really, bringing this thing home. And I think it will happen. But they have to, because Gary Gensler, he knows corruption better than anyone else. He's letting you know, if you don't make this happen, you don't know what the next SEC chair and whatever the administration is, what their policies are going to be. We have to strike while the iron is hot and finalize this thing. Lastly, we see Status posting this quote here from Dan Moorhead, founder of Pantera Capital, saying Ripple is going after Swift. Now, Pantera has 4.7 billion assets under management. He understands. And look, I don't mean to downplay payments. Payments are huge. It's the original use case of cryptocurrencies. XRP is a great crypto for payments. All I'm saying is, yeah, we're going to get that, but it's so much bigger than only that. RWAs, stablecoins, global trade of any sort of asset you can think of, NFT technology, you name it, it's coming to this ledger, and we're going to get payments, and it's massive, and it's the biggest thing there is, and it's the original use case of crypto, but we're getting the rest of it as well. And remember, XRP Ledger is the original DeFi ledger there is. Let me know what you think down below. As always, please like, please subscribe. The revolution will be televised right here on Jungle Link.